Flourish-Meant is sponsored by Access More.
Do you want to go deeper in your faith even while you're on the go? No matter how busy the season you're in, Access More has a library of faith-based podcasts to help you grow spiritually. With podcasts from Christian thought leaders such as Christine Kane, Lisa Harper, Taryn Wells, and Bob Goff. You can hear podcasts on religion, culture, family, entertainment, and so much more. Access More gives you a safe space to find inspiring conversations about faith. Start listening today at accessmore.com.
Do you know how to handle a transition after college or perhaps in other times of your life? That's what we're going to address today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be heard on the Edify app. Today, I have with me the illustrious Young Reitz. She teaches at Penn State University and leads After College Transition, an initiative that resources higher education professionals and organizational leaders with the tools they need to equip students for life after college. She's the author of After College, and her writing on the topic of post-college thriving has appeared in numerous publications, including Christianity Today and Relevant Magazine. She holds an MA in higher education from Geneva College, where she also serves as adjunct faculty. Welcome, Erica. You are a busy lady, so I am honored that you are on the show today.
Tina, thank you so much for having me. It is a delight to be here.
And we are honored to hear from you about how to transition after college. That can be difficult at any season, but in the last couple of years, I think it has proven, especially difficult because things have been so shut down and people have a harder time connecting with other peers and with business leaders. People are transitioning to working from home and finding remote work. It's just been very strange lately. So help us understand what is new and what is tried and true about transitioning from after college.
Yeah, you named it. It's a challenging time, and I feel for all of our graduates who are entering this space, or maybe if you're listening today, you're a parent of a graduate who's entering this space. The landscape has changed, even in just a short time. But what's not new is your word, weird. It's a weird time, but it's always been a weird time. In fact, that was the number one word students used to describe the transition out of college when I was doing my research for my master's. Asked them, what's the word that comes to mind? And the word was weird. It's just not like any other time. And it doesn't stay weird till you're 30, but as you're establishing that new normal, it can feel a little strange.
Yeah, I understand that because, when you're in college, you know what your goals are. You know exactly what you're needing to do to get done. You meet your goals, you meet your priorities, you take this class and the next class. And then when you get to the end, suddenly there's this wide open, now what do I do, right?
That's right. Yeah. And I think in contrast to other transitions prior to this point, so much shifts at once. Maybe the transition into college felt like a big transition, but the transition out, you're changing on so many different levels. That previous transition, maybe you maintained your status as student, or your financial status seems similar, even, as you were taking out loans. But once you're out in life after college, so much shifts at once. And it can be easy to reduce the transition to a few key things necessary for graduation. I got my job lined up, or my resume's polished, or I know where I'm going to live, or what grad school I'm going to go to. But there are so many different facets to the transition. And that's one thing I'm really passionate about, is opening up all angles of that conversation with young people so that it does lead to a life of flourishing beyond college.
Do you find that a lot of students, once they have achieved really well in academics, find a moment of despair and hopelessness when they realize it's not the same to achieve in the workplace and to achieve in the marketplace and to find a job that's fulfilling right after college, just like they did all the way through high school and into universities and maybe even post-secondary education institutions where they were in graduate studies? How do you handle that with the students that you work with, that moment of perhaps identity crisis that they're experiencing?
That's an excellent question. And if I might share a little from my own story, I can remember that transition being so difficult for me because I was that A student in college. I knew what I needed to do to get that steady performance feedback in the form of grades. And then I graduated and was like, whoa, how do you get an A in life after college? There wasn't a clear pathway for that. And it really sent me on a spiral in terms of, who am I when I'm not making an A? And then, this whole problem of attaching identity to roles that we play, even though I know I'm a 10 out of 10 in Christ, I lost sight of that right out of college when I tried to measure myself in terms of, oh, wait, I'm not making good money. I have one friend right now in this town. When I started to take stock of these different roles I played and would give myself a 3 out of 10 in these roles, it's shifted into my identity about who I thought I was. And so how to combat that, we need to know who we are in Christ, the thing that doesn't shift even in this shifting time.
How do students find community to help them center themselves in their identity in Christ and rebuild their sense of esteem in a healthier way after college when all their friends are leaving?
Yeah, that's probably the number one challenge that our students face post-college is finding community. And so if someone's listening to this podcast and they are recent grad, even 10 years out, and still feel like I haven't quite found my community, that's normal. It's challenging right after college. There's no other experience like the incubator of college to really accelerate intimacy and friendship and relationship. And then you get out, and finding that community can be really challenging. And so I'm a big advocate for getting connected to a local church, that is a place where you may find community and flourishing. And it may be really imperfect. It may not look like what you thought it was going to look like, but God may have a plan that's so different and so much bigger than your plan. Maybe your closest friends are going to be people a decade older than you, and God's going to use those people in really rich ways. I think about an alum who moved to the DC area, and one of her closest friends right out of college was a woman 10 years older, but this woman allowed her to say, come and see, look at my life. I'm married, I have kids. And this young grad was able to learn so much from, living life with someone who it wasn't the same as walking across the quad and getting, hanging out with 20 somethings, but was a beautiful relationship that mentored her into her own marriage and family life.
I think that's important, seeking mentorships and looking outside of the normal places you would think of. I also am recognizing that for new generations of people, connecting with a traditional church might not be their first default response to looking for community. Either they were wounded in the church, or they've become disillusioned with church, or they've gotten away from the church. Are there other types of organizations that can be Christ honoring, where students who've just graduated and are new in their workplace settings can find community with good values if they're not quite comfortable going into a church setting?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And many of us have been hurt by the church. I know COVID has also made it challenging, and people have settled into, for some, just taking in church and resources online, and there's benefits of that and drawbacks of that. I do believe being with other humans in person is a really positive thing. And so if you're someone who you're not entering the doors of a church right now, I think looking for those other pockets of like-minded individuals, and it can be, we had a great resource in our community. It did come out of the local church, but it attracted people from all different parts of our community, called the Third Place. And these third places exist in many different pockets, and you may find your own third place. And that comes from, Ray Oldenburg's term, a sociological term of like, we need that place outside of work and home to find connection. And so maybe for me, it was a writer's club right out of college. Maybe it's around a certain affinity that you have. I think about an alum who, she was an introvert, but loved ballroom dancing. And so she joined the ballroom dancing group in town and could kind of hide behind the activity that she really enjoyed. But that was definitely a foray into making good friends and community. And she met her spouse that she married there. So there's other places to find that. What's not healthy is just going week by week without engaging other humans besides in the office and at home. And sometimes our home, we live by ourselves. So to really push ourselves out of the rhythm or even the rut of our week to seek community elsewhere.
I think volunteering might be another opportunity to reach out and meet those mentors and meet those other like-minded people.
Yeah, I can tell you success stories of students who they got involved in serving, and that's where they met their people, because you're doing something first outside of yourself, which is a great thing to do, to take your eyes off of the challenges of the situation right out of college, but then meeting people who have those shared values, who want to serve. My sister met her spouse doing Habitat for Humanity. So yeah, not that this all has to lead to a romantic relationship, but just community and friendship. They were building a house together.
I love that story. I think that's so important to really think about different creative ways that we or people that we know can find community after college, because I think that's one of the hardest things, is the loneliness of that season.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to take a quick break for a commercial, so to speak. And then when we come back, we're going to get with Erica Reitz about some practical tips that we can follow to make that transition healthy and flourishing. Meet the Christian who married faith with true crime, Lori Morrison. Lori is a person of faith, a private investigator, and the producer of the award-winning podcast, The Unlovely Truth, where faith and true crime intersect. Lori and I would like to invite you to join the True Crime Mission Fields program, a life-changing opportunity exclusively joining Christians who have married faith and true crime. Featuring Chaplain Lori Prather, the products within the True Crime Mission Fields program allow you to connect your passions and skills as Christians with practical service opportunities within the world of true crime. You will begin to serve people in difficult circumstances and have a greater impact in this world than you ever imagined possible. Access your free report, Meet the Christian who married faith with true crime, and receive up to 70% off of any collection when you use the link in the show notes. And we're back with Erica Reitz, who is an expert in transitioning into life after college. Erica, what are some practical things that students and those who love them need to know about transitioning from life in college to life after college?
How long do we have, Tina? There's so many things that I could share, but I think even for just going through a transitional time, one thing I'm passionate about talking about is just helping us know what it is to go through a transitional time. Our culture talks a lot about change and this new exciting thing, but we don't always talk about the transition, that thing that's going on internally, and to pay attention to that when we're going through a transitional time. And so I like to open up that conversation with young people before they leave college, or even on the other side. Sometimes we feel it even more deeply, but to recognize that we are going to go through a transitional process. And one theorist, William Bridges, talks about endings, neutral zone, and new beginnings, and then paying attention to the inner signals that rise up during those times. And that's relevant for any transition that we go through. In fact, I was talking to a friend who's passionate about helping he works with college students, passionate about helping his college students transition. And one of his motivators in opening up this conversation in the senior year is he just knows his students are going to go through many, many life transitions beyond the transition out of college. And if he can give them tools to understand what it is to go through a transitional time during senior year, they're only going to be that more prepared when they change jobs, when they have another major loss in their life, when they get married, when they have children. So life is full of transitions. I don't think we always talk about them enough.
That's a really good point. And what about those who have to make multiple transitions from job to job to job after college? Can you talk about that extra challenge of those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, we know what's trending right now in terms of, young people who say, I will probably switch my job every 3 years, or the average, 20 something, I think it's 2.8 years at a job. And so we can look at that as, there's the work culture has changed in interesting ways and maybe in not so helpful ways. I was just talking to somebody about, should students commit to a certain job even when jobs themselves employers don't seem as, quote, committed to their employees. And I kind of push against the commitmentless culture to say, I think it could be really wise to consider committing to a job. I remember signing a 3-year contract when I was in my early 20s to a job in college ministry. And my peers at the time, Erica, 3 years? As if I was signing my life away. But it was a beautiful thing. That 3-year commitment was a beautiful thing. And it allowed me to, map the land that first year and then really realize what I wanted to create in that second year and then start to refine it. I ended up staying for 14 years, but a 3-year commitment is actually a really small thing. And I think we need to push against some of that commitmentless culture and say, I'm going to commit to this thing, even in its imperfection. I'm going to commit to a place. I would really encourage young people to launch out with a theology of place. Like, what could it mean, to quote Wendell Berry, to commit to a place for its flourishing and my own? That's a really significant thing, but we're almost, I think, too willing to up and leave. I'm not saying stay in a toxic job. I would encourage students to get away from a toxic employer or a toxic job. I was walking with a student, Devin, who he took a job that was it was a toxic environment, could never please the boss, a very get ahead kind of attitude among his peers in the workplace. And he ended up sticking it out for 1 year, felt like that was a good thing to do for his resume and LinkedIn profile, but said after a year, I'm looking for something else. And that was a good choice.
I think academically, we study what a workplace should look like and what a career path should look like. And when you get into the career field, it's not the ideal. So there is a little bit of a disappointment when you get into your career path, because it's not exactly what you always dreamed it would be when you first get into the real life application. So how do you tell the difference between what's truly toxic and really isn't for you, and you need to make a complete shift in what you're really doing, and it's just not ideal, and I could work through it and make the best of it and still achieve what I was designed to do?
Yeah, I wish I had a magic bullet answer to that question, because that's not the first time I've been asked that. And it's such a personal question. And like discerning anything in life, we can't do this in a vacuum, right? We discern in our personal relationship with God, but we also invite trusted community into that process. People who can see this thing maybe from a different angle, who may be able to say, actually, you keep saying that you want to stick this out, but what I'm seeing is this, and this that make this place toxic. Or I'm seeing that you're prototyping this thing right now. It got a little hard because you weren't trained in this. That's not toxic. That's you working through life's challenges, and you need to work through life's challenges. And so I think we can't discern it in a vacuum, and it's unique to each person and their unique giftedness. So I wish I had, this is the 5 steps for how to figure it out, but I do think it is way more personal to that individual, to the specific experience that they're going through. But this attitude of the 20s are for training, I think is a really healthy, that's what my colleague Johnny would always say, the 20s are for training. You are testing and trying and prototyping, and that's really the only way we can figure out, is this thing a fit? And so I'm a huge proponent of doing those internships during the undergrad years, and then job shadowing, informational interviewing, any kind of time where you can get a little, what's called a realistic preview of the job before you make that commitment. Chances are you're going to have a much better indicator of whether that thing is for you or not.
That's a really good point, because that real world experience is more valuable even than some of the training that you're going to get academically about that career field.
Hands down. That's why we send our student teachers out to student teach, hopefully before second semester, senior year. But that should exist for every job. Everything we're training for, we need those previews to discern, is this going to work? we have to prototype.
So how important would you say it is to work with a mentor or a life coach to help with those transitional decisions, to map out, these are my gifts and my strengths. This is what I'm designed for. This is my identity as Christ made it. And these are the pros and cons of the work situation that I'm in. Is this the field for me? Is this the workplace for me? And what are the things that I'm seeing as negatives? Are they actually toxic, or are they just not ideal?
Oh, I'm a huge proponent of mentorship, coaching. We can all benefit from that listening ear that can just see something that we can't see. And for many young people, those opportunities exist, even like free services in your undergrad years that you can take in, as well as, some of these alumni associations at Penn State. These students have access to career counseling for their entire time beyond Penn State. That's the benefit of the Alumni Association. It's one of the most impressive alumni associations out there. And so I also think it's well worth your dollars to hire a life coach or someone. If you're in that place of, I'm not sure what's next, we can always benefit. And when we're paying for it, we have more skin in the game to figure it out. So I'm a huge proponent of whether it's a mentor, or sometimes we do need counseling and therapy too. We're carrying a lot of things, and we're seeing lots of trends in mental health issues right now. And so I don't mean to take this in a direction you weren't going, Tina, but I know friends who are running fellows programs, these programs that are for recent grads who want to figure out how to launch well. And they are creating funds within their program and requiring these recent grads to go to counseling, just because there's so many things that people are dealing with. And so the point is, we can all benefit from counsel and coaching. And I'm a huge proponent of seeking that out.
I think the counseling piece is important to point out, not just because I am trained as a counselor, but also because of the season we've been in the last few years. There's been a lot of loss. There's been additional issues with depression and mental health and anxiety that have heightened, especially among the very young. So those who are teenagers, even children, and new adults in that college age group are experiencing more mental health issues even than other older age ranges of people. And that's something that we're finding that was not expected as a result of the pandemic isolation and the fear that's been instilled in us about the things that have happened in the world recently and some of the division that has happened in our country. So these have all been pressures that have been really particularly difficult for younger people to cope with. And counseling may be necessary for that. And also, even without this past season, college is a time when kids are experiencing a lot of crises. There's a lot of abuse trauma that happens during college years. And there are betrayals and breakups and all kinds of things that go on during those college years. So it's important that we help college students and those who are transitioning out of college feel as though there's no stigma and there's no shame. Right. And in fact, it should be encouraged if there's any kind of crisis or trauma or difficulty, that it's really not only okay, but recommended to go seek counseling.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think to name that transitional time makes us even more vulnerable. And so, we are more vulnerable when we're in a transitional time, and to be aware of that. I often tell my students, it's strong students who seek help, not weak students. And so really trying to flip that narrative that we have in our culture of like, oh, it's, I can't ask for help. That's weakness. No, it's strong students who seek help. And I really try to encourage. I'm often emailing with students of, hey, I noticed this. I think you could benefit. Can I help make a referral for you? Because there's so much at stake when we don't take those steps. And we see it in our future relationships, in our, all these things. But I'm a big proponent of let's do all we can in our 20s to get healthy and to find those resources that are going to help us get there.
Erica, what are some final tips that you want to leave with the listeners about transitioning into life after college?
Well, I mean, I'll say my transition out of college did not go as smoothly as planned. It was hard. I was kind of a train wreck. And I mean, I shared some of those things and I share some of those things in the book. And so that's what got me started in this work. I'm passionate about helping young people have a better transition than I had and to normalize if it doesn't go as planned, you're not alone. I wish that I knew I wasn't alone. And so for those out there who just feel like I need help and hope in this transitional time, that's why I wrote After College. For parents who are helping their young people navigate this transitional time, to be mindful that you're going through your own transition too. I think that to name that, parents go through their own transition, but to just not rush the process. I think that's my last hope for folks, is to not rush the process. God does some of his best heart work in us during transitional times. And so milk it for all it's worth. Allow God to do the things he wants to do in you and through you during the transition. But if you try to rush it, you'll miss it.
That is such great wisdom and insight. I so appreciate that, Erica. How can listeners stay in touch with you and get even more wisdom and insight and get in touch with you to get a copy of your book?
Yes, you can buy After College wherever books are sold, or you can come find me on aftercollegetransition.com, aftercollegetransition.com. I would especially love to help you if you're trying to help other college students make that transition. I really care about helping people who work with college students intervene during the college years so that students are more prepared to thrive after.
Thank you so much, Erica. I hope that all of you listening have enjoyed this discussion and are sharing this with other people that you may know who need a better and healthier transition from college to life after college. And of course, I also hope that you come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.
Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be found on the Edify app.